Welcome again to Fundraising with Social Media. My name is Becky Wiegand, and I am an interactive events producer here at TechSoup. I will be facilitating today's webinar, and I just want to take a couple of minutes to let you know a little bit about TechSoup, and then we'll get right into the topic. So we are part of TechSoup Global, where we're working toward the day when every nonprofit, library, and social benefit organization has the tech, knowledge, and resources to operate at their full potential. We consider these webinars part of that process. We want to make sure that you know how to use the tools that are available for donation through our catalog, as well as tools that are already out there free of use to help meet your organization's mission. We are a 501c3 nonprofit, and you can read a little bit about our impact on the screen. We work in 56 countries around the world, and one of our biggest contributions to the nonprofit and library and social sector is our product donation programs. And you can learn more about them by looking at this screen. And if you'd like to learn more about donations for your organization, feel free to visit our website at TechSoup.org. With that, I'd like to go ahead and introduce our speakers today. We are joined by a couple of really excellent experts in this field. Darian Rodriguez-Hayden, who is the co-founder of Social Media for Nonprofits and previously ran the Craigslist Foundation and has had a lot of experience in this area. And we also have Leslie Mansford, who is a trustee, co-founder of Razoo Foundation. I'll give it over to them in just a moment to give a little bit more introduction of themselves and their organizations and talk a little about the agenda. But first I would like to get a good overview of you, of what your experience is with crowdfunding and using social media to raise money for your organizations. Go ahead and click on your screen to tell us what your level of familiarity is. We are going to cover this topic primarily today because crowdfunding is very much driven by social media and digital storytelling and digital media. And so we just want to look at what your level of experience is, because that helps our speakers get a good idea of how they can tailor this presentation to your needs. So looking at the results, we've got about 68% heard of it, haven't tried it, 30% what's crowdfunding. So that's helpful because that means we do need to spend a little bit of time just defining what it is, what it means. So we'll do that, and we will also talk about why crowdfunding and how to launch your campaign, how to use social media, and how to celebrate and thank those donors that come in through those sources. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over by introducing Darian. Please join us on the line and take it over. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Becky, and thanks to TechSoup in general for all the great work they do. I hope, just as evidenced by the fact that you're all here, that you're familiar with what a great resource they are. And you know, if you're not buying your software through TechSoup, you're making a mistake. They save you about 98%. And it's also just a great, vibrant online community for nonprofit leaders around tech. So I'm really excited to be with you today and also to have Leslie here. You know, if you haven't heard about Razoo, they're one of the leading crowdfunding platforms, and they've worked with tens of thousands of nonprofits and helped them raise millions of dollars. And so it'll be great to have her perspective sharing some of the insights they've learned through that work. But that said, I do just want to clarify that, you know, when Becky said that you've got a couple of experts presenting today, I need to push back on that, because at the end of the day, if anybody says they're a social media expert, you should not believe them. And you know, I produce the only conference series in the country focused on social media for social good, so I know a decent amount about the space, but the reality is the field is simply too new and it's evolving too quickly for anyone to be an expert. So don't worry about it if you're not familiar with what crowdfunding is, or if you've heard of it and you don't know how to do it. That's why we're here. You know, we know enough to be able to you know, raise some questions, educate you, and point you in the right direction. What we're going to do today, as Becky mentioned, is we're going to start out briefly kind of contextualizing why crowdfunding is important. But really where we're going to spend the bulk of our time is on how to actually launch a campaign and how to utilize social media to drive the success of that. And then, as Becky mentioned, we'll end with a quick comment about the importance of celebrating and thanking your donors. I do want to mention that when we talk about crowdfunding, the word campaign is absolutely crucial because in general, if you're just using crowdfunding, which is really the notion of, getting lots of people to chip in and also having them tell their friends about your fundraising campaign and leveraging that kind of viral marketing potential, that as opposed to just saying, hey, give us as much money as possible, the more money we raise, the more kids we can help, that can be powerful, but if you make it an actual campaign, that is one of the crucial elements of success. And so we'll get into that in just a second. But first, let's talk briefly about why crowdfunding is important. First of all, whether it's online or off, we like to say that people don't give to organizations, they give to people. And so this is a really phenomenal opportunity to connect with people on an individual level. Another thing that's important to remember when we talk about traditional fundraising is that one of the things that us fundraisers like to use is that the most powerful form of ask is a peer ask. And that typically sounds like, I invite you to join me in supporting the great work of this organization. That is the best way to raise money. That's why it's so important we get our board members to fundraise and to donate. And what is social media other than the most powerful peer-to-peer based medium in history? So this is a really great opportunity. And the big opportunity at the end of the day is not only to raise money from individuals, but to turn those donors into fundraisers. To, on the thank you page after they've given a donation, to just simply say, won't you please spread the word to your Facebook friends and Twitter followers, make it as easy as one click for them to send out a pre-populated message saying something like I just said before, won't you please join me in supporting the great work of this organization? I just gave $50, you should too, here's a link. Boom. That is, money in the bank. It's a 20 to 200% increase in online fundraising. So if your current donation processing engine does not enable your donors to be able to spread the word via social media, you're leaving a lot of money on the table. Now, in terms of how much money we're talking about here, on the whole, individual donations to nonprofits are at about $300 billion a year. Of that, online giving is about 13%. So we are talking about tens of billions of dollars. But most excitingly, the growth rate of that, whereas giving as a whole is relatively flat, it went up by about 2% last year, online giving and especially crowdfunding is growing by about 30 to 50%. So just an exponential breakneck growth rate. And it's because it's such a new field. And what's interesting here, given this range, is it's actually the larger organizations that are seeing the higher growth rates, which is kind of counterintuitive because they're already so big it's harder for them to grow. But the reality is you get out of it what you put into it. And the organizations that have the dedicated staff or the teams working on social media are getting a lot more out of it from a fundraising standpoint. Realistically, however, the data shows that the typical nonprofit only allocates about a quarter of one full-time person. So if you have no dedicated staff on this, that's okay. All the tips we're going to share today are really focused on helping people be more effective with their efforts and integrating it into already very busy schedules. I'm a recovering executive director. I know what it's like to have too much on your plate. And so I'd like to hand it over to my co-presenter today, Leslie from Razoo and Razoo Foundation, to share a couple of her thoughts about why crowdfunding represents such a big opportunity.
Thanks, Darian. It's great to be here to share some of my experiences from running Razoo for the last couple of years and getting exposure to around 70,000 different campaigns. So when people ask me, why should we worry about crowdfunding, some of the responses I always give are, it's actually very easy to get started with crowdfunding or online fundraising. You don't have to be technical. You really don't need to know a lot about social media to actually create your campaign for the first time. It's really, there's very few barriers to entry. It's very efficient. It's a very cost-effective form of fundraising, both to bring in new donors and also to continue that dialogue and donor engagement. As Darian said, it's social. It's the easiest way to really bring in and increase your donor base. It's no longer just about the $50 that I can bring to your nonprofit as a donor, it's the $250 that my network can bring when I share the news about your cause to my network. And it's here to stay. As Darian said, it's the fastest growing form of giving, online fundraising, online giving, and it's also very important to the next generation of givers, to the millennials. This is where they are. This is where they're already giving online. They're on Facebook. They're giving on Facebook, and that's where they want to be communicated with. So it's definitely a medium that's here to stay. And the other thing I would say as well is don't be intimidated by the idea of online fundraising. It's really just taking all of the knowledge and the tools that you already have about fundraising and just bringing them to a different medium. So don't be intimidated.
Absolutely. All great points, Leslie. Thank you for that. And so, again, we wanted to just very quickly contextualize why this is a big deal, but obviously you wouldn't be on this webinar if you didn't already think there was potential for your organization as it relates to crowdfunding. So let's get into it. And again, this notion of launching not just an online fundraising effort, but a campaign. Now, one quick thing I wanted to mention along the lines of this notion of there are no experts is, nobody really knows exactly what they're doing. We're all figuring it out as we go along. We're building the plane while flying it. So don't be afraid to just dive in. Instead of locking yourself in an ivory tower and planning out every single detail of everything and then executing it and expecting nothing to go wrong, you have to assume that things are going to need to evolve. So plan for that. Leave the capacity from a personnel standpoint, from a time standpoint, et cetera, and just do it, and don't be afraid to fail fast and fail forward. So when I talk about the concept of a campaign, what do I mean? Again, on one extreme would be what I'm suggesting you not do, which is help us raise as much money as possible. The more money we raise, the more kids we can help. That's fine and well from a general operating support standpoint, but really the way to be most effective with crowdfunding and online fundraising is to have a thermometer, is to have a campaign, and essentially a SMART goal if you're familiar with that term. But in general, the notion is, how much money are you raising, by when, what for, and who's going to benefit. So we are raising $20,000. We're going to do it by October 15th, and the key here is that date should be ideally less than 45 days out, but certainly no more than 90. Why? Because we're in an attention economy, and if people feel like there's no sense of urgency, they'll just delete it and assume they can come back to it later, which they generally will not do. So how much money, by when? We're going to build a playground at San Francisco Elementary School, and it's going to benefit 647 kids. And oh, by the way, schools with playgrounds have 20% higher attendance rates and 30% higher graduation rates. So help us help these, not just these kids, but these 647 kids like Juan, right? You've got to make it personal. Now, there is a piece of planning that is really important, and I know, Leslie, you've seen this over and over again across all the campaigns that Razoo's host.
Yes, exactly. And as you say, Darian, you have to think about it as a campaign. And while I said it's actually quite easy to set up an online fundraiser, the time that you need to spend is actually in the planning process of developing the campaign itself. So the slide that you're seeing in front of you right now is really showing at the top there what you really want your campaign to look like. You've got your start date, you've got your end date around 45 days later, and you've already figured out between day 1 and day 45 what are the different things that you're going to be promoting and when. How are you going to continue to reach out to your audience? Unfortunately, what tends to happen is something that looks a little bit more like the example at the bottom of the slide, where people get very excited at the beginning of their campaign. They promote it out of the gate, and then sort of there's a mass panic towards the end of the 45 days where suddenly they realize that they're reaching the end of their campaign and they haven't reached their goal. So I think really it's again just about thinking about the campaign up front and planning out all of the different mechanisms to reach out to your audience.
Great point. And I think one of the things we've seen is a lot of the campaigns actually go over their goal, their target. They break the thermometer in a good way And so, even this top ideal scenario, you can actually see an uptick at the end because people want to be part of a winning team. And when they hear you hit your goal, they're actually more inclined to give.
So talking a little bit more as to, how to think about your campaign. Obviously, it's all about storytelling, just as other campaigns that you may be doing offline. The key thing is, what's the story? What's the message that you're creating here? And the wonderful thing about online fundraisers is that you have these different tools to use to create that story. So that's text, that's images, that's video. All of those pieces come together to tell a story. One of the things I like to encourage people is, be creative with the medium. Come up with an interesting, fun, compelling campaign. One of the examples there on the screen that you see that I love is the Awkward Dance Project, which is actually a young woman who is willing to humiliate herself to help cure cancer by releasing different videos showing different awkward dance moves. It sounds a little crazy, but extremely compelling, and people are coming back for more to see what's the new awkward move of the week. So again, encouraging people to be creative. This particular slide is just showing you how some of these elements can come together. On the right-hand side there, you see the different donation levels that you can construct for your campaign. And I think one of the key things that we haven't touched on yet really is around making sure that you can link those donation amounts to impact. The more that you can be precise there, the more effective your campaign is going to be. People want to know, what is their money going to do? What is it going to achieve? In the middle there would be the area where you can put photos, you can upload a video, you can upload content about your campaign. And then the top right-hand side there, you'll see the opportunity to very easily share your campaign on Facebook, Twitter, and other social media outlets.
And just to underscore those the first and the third point, because I think they're so important, what you see here that Razoo has done that's so important for the Smithsonian is just not only does it have the ability to share, but it talks about the reason why someone would want to do that, and it really clarifies the value of that share. So it makes it worth the donor or the user's time. The other thing is, in terms of this sort of laundry list, if you will, of these different donation levels and the impact associated with each, I would really encourage you to test this out on two levels. One is play around with different default donation levels. Is it 25, 65, 150, et cetera, and other? Or should it be 5, 25, 100, 500, other? I don't know, but it'll be different for every nonprofit. You can change those numbers and see what actually gets you more dollars per donor on average. And then similarly, once you've optimized the default donation levels, I would also optimize the description of impact for each level and play around with 2 or 3 different ways of what kind of impact does $25 make possible. And again, look to optimize your efforts from an online revenue generating standpoint.
So I've already talked about, the options that you have with creating your online campaign to bring images, video and text all together. So images are, obviously extremely powerful. This is a great example of a nonprofit that we work with, the Big Cat Rescue. And they do a wonderful job of creating a number of sort of smaller campaigns for specific asks. And this one was around Halloween, and the campaign was to keep the park open on Halloween evening for sort of a scary big cat night. And they released these wonderful videos of big cats playing with pumpkins, as well as these very strong images. And again, so, images themselves are powerful, but as we move to the next screen, videos themselves are even more so. A fundraiser with a video will typically earn 4 times more than a fundraiser without. And you don't have to, again, become intimidated about the idea of, I need to create a video, that sounds time-intensive, that sounds resource-intensive. We're going to actually show you a video on the next screen, which really just shows the simplicity and how, sometimes simple is best.
Skies are crying, I am watching, catching teardrops in my hands. Only silence as it's ending, like we never had a chance. Do you have to make me feel like there's nothing left of me? You can take everything I have, you can break everything I have, like I'm made of glass, like I'm made of paper. Go on and try to tear me down, I will be rising from the ground like a skyscraper, like a skyscraper. As the smoke clears, I awaken and untangle you from me. Would it make you feel better to watch me while I bleed? Oh, my windows still are broken, but I'm standing on my feet. You can take everything I have, you can break everything I am, like I'm made of glass.
Anyway, again, I think that just underscores that, you don't, again, have to spend a lot of resources and money behind creating an effective video. This particular slide is basically now moving into, so you've created your online fundraiser, you've put together your story using all of the various elements that you have, and now it's time to think about how am I going to promote my fundraiser, and to use all of the vehicles that you have at your disposal. So that could be a website. Perhaps you do a countdown to the launch of your crowdfunding campaign. You can use a press release. You can obviously use social media. You can use a widget on your own website or on your Facebook page. The key thing is, again, in that upfront planning stage, to figure out where are all of the different touch points where I can promote my crowdfunding campaign.
Absolutely, and I think one specific point I wanted to underscore as it relates to this widget that's highlighted here with the sort of Razoo thermometer on it is a couple things. So first off, you'll note that it's actually over the goal, which, as I said, is pretty common, believe it or not. But the other thing is that when you first go to launch your campaign, you actually want to do what they call seeding the tip jar. There's been a lot of research done to show that, they did a study where they had a donation bucket at a museum, and when it was empty, people just walked right by it. When it had change, they would give change, dollars, they would give dollars, 20s, they'd give 20s, and then if it was hundreds, they'd keep walking. So there's, some kind of point where it'll be too much. But the idea is, you don't want to launch a crowdfunding and an online fundraising campaign with an empty thermometer when you promote it to the public. And so really making sure that you start out with a select few sort of inner circle key allies that can help you make sure that that thermometer is hopefully about a third filled before you go out to the public. That's really crucial. And so, Leslie, I'm kind of curious from your perspective, who are some of those audiences that you would go out to sort of seed the pond?
Yeah, exactly, Darian. I mean, I like to think of audiences in sort of concentric circles, and, you want to start with the inner circle of supporters that are completely behind you. And so some of those people might be your staff, right, your team. Hopefully that it's your board of trustees. And then perhaps there are some key influencers that really support your cause. Perhaps these key influencers have large Twitter or Facebook followers themselves. So as Darren said, you want to sort of seed that tip jar with some of the folks that you know are going to support your campaign. And so when you then open it up more to the general public, to your volunteers, to your donors, you already have some momentum. The flywheel's already spinning. You already have some traction. The other thing I was just going to point out here as well is that one of the other opportunities you have when you're creating an online fundraising campaign is to enlist others, perhaps that inner circle, to join you and create their own fundraiser around that campaign. It's a great thing to try and get your board to do. And you can also try and get your board to do it as a team. And, not only will you raise more money, but it builds a great sense of camaraderie. So, using all of those different options, providing an easy way for your supporters to actually grab the assets for your campaign and get them really working on your behalf. Yeah, and finally here, as we talked a little bit earlier, one, don't be afraid to ask, and then also ask very clearly and tie to direct impact. Darren was talking about before how, as you look at the different donation volume amounts, the donation levels, tie that as very specifically to impact. The clearer you can be, the more precise you can be, the more effective you'll be at raising money.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the Sally Struthers effect that we were talking about. But this is true online and off. You don't want to just talk about what great work you're doing and then pause and hope that that person you just spoke to is going to be so inspired that they're going to break out their checkbook. It might happen, but you're going to be a lot more successful if at the end of that song and dance you say, thanks so much for your interest. I'd love to invite you to support our work today with a gift of $100, which would enable us to provide 500 liters of clean drinking water. Whatever the case may be, make it concrete and help them understand the incremental impact that their donation will have. It's true online and off. Now, speaking of online, let's get into social media. And so what I wanted to share now is just a variety of tips that we've seen. Again, social media for nonprofits is organizing conferences all over the country as well as India, Canada, and we've identified a couple really simple to implement tips that are going to help you with your online fundraising efforts and in general with online engagement. I should mention we have our next conference coming up in San Francisco on October 10th and 11th. Our website will be here at the end. We also do events in Silicon Valley, Seattle, Austin, New York, Boston, and D.C., as well as Chicago. So if any of those are of interest, let me know. And then actually tomorrow I'll be in Dayton, Ohio, and next Tuesday in Houston. So you'll see my email later. Feel free to reach out if any of those are of interest. Now, in terms of social media, the idea here is a couple things. So first off, as I mentioned, the typical nonprofit only has the equivalent of 1/4 of one person devoted to social media. And in fact, it's ideal, it's preferable to have multiple people making up, taking that capacity on. So it could be 4 or 5 people each putting in a couple hours a week. Now, the problem is that if, tomorrow it's my turn to send out a Facebook post, how do I know what's already been said, what's going to be said, without going back through all the posts, without talking to my colleagues about what they want to send out shortly, etc.? That's a huge waste of time, not very efficient. So the very simple strategy and tactic for addressing this is once a month to get together with your team, or even to do this on your own if it's a solo effort, and create an editorial or a content calendar. And I can send you a very simple template of this for free as a follow-up to this webinar if you'd like. Just email me later. But the point is, it's a really simple spreadsheet. It's a calendar that maps out, tomorrow at noon, I'm going to send out a Facebook post about our upcoming fundraising gala. And then Friday at 2 p.m., Leslie's going to send out a tweet about our need for volunteers, et cetera, et cetera. And it's just a really simple way to sort of say who is doing what, where, when. That way you know what's expected of you. If you're the kind of person that likes to do your homework in advance, you can use some of the pre-scheduling tools to do that, tools like Hootsuite or TweetDeck, and now actually Facebook enables you to do that directly. But planning out your calendar is really crucial. It's also really helpful because you want to think about how often do you want to be posting, right? And which platforms do you want to post to? In terms of frequency, when you're thinking about Facebook, which is, kind of the primary place, there's over 1 billion people that have logged on to Facebook within the last 30 days. Once you start to post more than 3 times a day, 3 or more, you start to lose people. So the optimal frequency is 1 to 2 times a day. That said, you should be at least on the lower end posting once a week. And if you're not posting once a week to Facebook, you basically have an empty store, and I would just close it down. It's going to reflect poorly on you. With Twitter, on the other hand, it's a much more fast-paced environment. You want to be tweeting at least daily if you're on Twitter, and there is no ceiling. There is no upper limit. The other, and part of that is because on average only 2% of your audience are actually going to see any given tweet. So the other thing with Twitter is that you can actually repeat yourself. You can't use the same exact post because the platform won't let you, but you can, very slightly change a post and send it out again. Whereas with Facebook, it's kind of rude to repeat yourself, and you want to take different angles on, today we talk about the fundraising event, tomorrow we talk about the silent auction items there, the day after we talk about the keynote speaker, etc. Right? Remember this notion of peer-to-peer asks and making it easy for people after they've given to be able to invite others to support it, and also this notion that we talked about of seeding the tip jar before you launch your campaign. Now, as you're planning out your content strategy for the next month, what times of day should you be posting? And the data I'm going to share right now is in aggregate across all organizations, for and nonprofit and individuals. But as a starting point, you should certainly test this out. But as a starting point, what are the best times of day to post? Well, during the week, it's what I call the burrito principle, right? You want to get people in their downtime, when they're on their way into work in the morning, during lunch, when they're having a burrito checking their smartphone, at the end of the day when the boss ain't looking or they're on their way back home, or actually the single best time of day to post during the week is after the kids go to sleep. Now, in terms of day of week, weekends are the best, pretty significantly so, and when, all weekdays are about the same, but Wednesdays are actually the worst. So something to keep in mind as you're mapping out your strategy and planning out who's going to post what, where, and when. Now, this next tip, this is probably the simplest thing I'm going to share today, but it will double the effectiveness of your online efforts. And by that I mean the number of likes, comments, and shares that you generate, and that really is the currency in today's attention economy. So quite simply, if your post ends in a question mark versus a period, twice as many people will like, comment, and share, and retweet and remix it. Why is that? Think about it. If you send out a post saying, take a look at this article, and the New York Times just published about homelessness, period, versus what do you think about what the New York Times had to say about the state of homelessness in New York? Right? Very similar message, but differently framed and much more engaging. Twice as likely to get a response. So try and ask questions whenever you can, and just so you know, if you remember this, the words would and should are the 2 best words to start your questions with. Now, Leslie touched on this earlier as it relates to fundraising, integrating photos, integrating videos. This is true not only for fundraising, but in general, and it's true at the same rate. If your post has a photo associated with it, on average, you will get twice as many likes, comments, and shares. If it has a video, on average, you'll get 4 times as many. So definitely, if you have that content, you want to use it. You also want to make sure to tag people. Because think about it from a personal perspective. How many times have you gotten that email from Facebook saying you've been tagged in a photo and not gone to Facebook to make sure it's not a bad picture of you? Right? People are vain, and they're going to go look. And once they're there, the likelihood of them liking, commenting, or sharing goes up exponentially. So take that minute to tag people. Emoticons. This is actually kind of interesting and a bit counterintuitive, and it might not always be appropriate for you and for your nonprofit and for any given message. But if your post has an emoticon, one of those little smiley faces, it gets a 52% higher engagement rate on average. So 50% more people will play with it, will interact with it. So if appropriate, throw a smiley face in. Domain names, little tip to remember. Twitter, because you're limited to 140 characters, it automatically shortens your domain names when you put out a post and you have a link in it. Facebook does not do that, but some people will use Bitly and other link shortening services because they want to be able to track things, etc. The thing with Facebook is when people see one of those unnatural URLs, if you will, they actually think they're spam and they're less likely to click on them. So if you are going to use those tools, with Facebook, once you put a website in the post, you can delete the URL so people don't see it, and the link will still be there. So keep that in mind. You don't want people to see those abbreviated URLs on Facebook. And then finally, if you're going to show up to the virtual cocktail party that is social media, if people ask you a question, you want to respond. If they write a comment, you want to thank them for it, or you want to comment back. You want to use social media to recognize your board, your volunteers, your donors. It's a really inexpensive and powerful way to do that. And you want to be part of the conversation. If somebody that you're following sends out an interesting post, you want to retweet it. You want to comment on it. You want to share it, etc. So in terms of the value of a share, and this is something that may be helpful as you're potentially making the case to your board or to your executive director of why it's so valuable for you to be engaged in social media, Leslie, I know you've come across some data that you've witnessed across all the thousands of campaigns that you've managed in terms of how valuable a Facebook share is.
Yeah, so through our analysis, we've come up with a number that every time your fundraiser is shared by someone, on average, you'll bring in an incremental $18. So again, going back to that concept of it's not just about the donation that I bring to the table as a donor, it's the donations that my network can bring to the table, which is really the power of online fundraising, social fundraising, crowdfunding.
Absolutely. And I know I've also seen some data in terms of what the value of a follow is, that it's said that it's about $124 in terms of how much a follower is worth per year. And that was Blackbot that published a study on that in conjunction with Inten recently. So we're talking about pretty sizable numbers here, and obviously it's about what the strategy is to get to that kind of value. So two more tips that I want to share as you're thinking through your social media strategy, and this one in particular as you're thinking through your content calendar, your editorial calendar. If you've ever been to a cocktail party, again, we're sticking with the metaphor, and you started to talk to someone and they sucked up all the air in the room. All they wanted to do was talk about themselves, number one, and even worse, all they wanted to do was talk about their work. That's going to get boring really quickly. You're going to fake a phone call or something like that, go to the bathroom or get a drink, whatever, because nobody's interested in talking to that kind of person, at least for any extended period of time. You want to nurture these relationships, and you want to really take advantage of a huge opportunity with social media, which is establishing your cause, your organization, as a thought leader in your field. What is the very simple tactic and guideline for doing that? It's basically to think of yourself as a content curator, meaning, the curator is the person at the museum that's deciding what paintings go up and, et cetera, and is kind of creating a connective tissue between everything. Well, you want to do the same thing with the issues you represent, whether it's the arts, homelessness, education, etc. And so the guideline here is that at least half of the posts that you're sending out should actually not be about your organization, your impact, your needs, etc., but rather should be about the issue that you represent. It should be about, articles or reports or research that's been done or events other groups in the space are doing. Whatever it might be, could be retweeting something somebody else says and adding a little layer of context of why you think this is relevant. But at least half of your content should be about thought leadership, and what that's going to do is it's going to make the other half that's more promotional and more commercial, it's going to make people pay more attention to that. And also, when people decide that, hey, I want to support children's cancer, and you're the group that is always sending out valuable information about that field, they're going to be much more likely to support your cause. So, again, think of yourself as a content curator. And then one final tip before we wrap up and talk about celebrating your donors and take some questions is this idea, really simple concept of creating a social media marketing committee. Now, the point here is that if you've been on Facebook for a couple years, then you've probably noticed that the way Facebook works has actually changed. Whereas in the beginning, if you got on Facebook, you would see the posts of anyone that you were following that had posted in a reasonably, a recent amount of time, and vice versa. When you posted something, all of your followers would see it as long as they got online. Well, it doesn't work that way anymore. Why is that? Well, it's because, Facebook had over 1 billion people log on in the last 30 days. On average, they logged on 6 to 7 times a day, and on average, they have 135 friends each. So there's just simply too much noise. And as a result, Facebook has essentially evolved into a traffic cop, and they've had to identify who are the people and which are the posts that are interesting and which are the people in the posts that are boring, because they don't want to bother you with the boring stuff that you're unlikely to care about. So how do they do that? They use an algorithm that is frequently referred to as an edge ranking, and that is identifying, are you fascinating or are you boring? That's taking into account a variety of different things, some of which are the tips that we mentioned. Does it have a photo or a video? Are people tagged? Is it a question? Things like that. Those are all really helpful. But the biggest factor is, does anybody care? Are people liking, commenting, or sharing these posts? Are they retweeting what's on Twitter? Right? And so the idea here is to form a social media marketing committee to basically game the system and stack the deck. What does that look like? That looks like recruiting your entire staff, your entire board, and hopefully some key allies that have large social media followings, and to ask them for just 5 minutes a week of their time. So this is very much intended to be a low-touch, high-value contribution. You could ask celebrities, you could ask, journalists and reporters about this. Academics that are really busy, but that are leaders in the field and have a huge community of followers. Do they have 5 minutes a week to help you, cure more kids with cancer? Whatever the case may be, tie it to mission. And the way you're going to execute on this is you're going to send this group 1 email a week. Now, if you have more than 20 people on this committee that you've recruited, which would be great, I would split it up into multiple different groups. So maybe one group gets the email Tuesday, one gets it Thursday. And your email is going to become a very simple template. It's going to look almost identical every week. It's going to look like this. Here are 3 things you can do in the next 5 minutes to help us feed more children, whatever your mission may be. But it's a pithy little three-word way of saying it. So here are 3 things you can do in the next 5 minutes to help us feed more children, : Bullet point number 1, here's a link to our Facebook page. Go there and like, comment, or share at least 3 of our posts. Bullet point number 2, here's our Twitter page. Go there and retweet or remix 2 of our tweets. And then finally, bullet point number 3, fill in the blank with whatever you need this week. And again, remember, it's got to be low touch, high value, something we can do in 2 or 3 minutes. So it's invite 3 people to attend our upcoming gala, or invite 5 people to follow us on Facebook, or whatever the case may be. It's really just 5 minutes a week, but now you're getting them engaged. You're telling that Facebook algorithm that you're one of the interesting people that it should be promoting heavily to your followers, and you're also reaching all the followers of the people that are liking, commenting, sharing, and retweeting. So creating this kind of committee can be really powerful. And now, let's wrap up. I want to hand it back to Leslie to talk about the importance of celebrating and thanking your donors.
Yeah, thanks, Darian. Well, I think we all know the importance generally of thanking donors, and what's, I think, wonderful about online fundraising is it gives you many tools to do that in a very easy and efficient way. So, moving to the next slide, you'll be able to see different ways for you to stay in touch with your donors. Use, again, the tools that you have available to make announcements when milestones are met. So you can go in and you can update your online fundraising campaign. You can provide new news that's happened, or you're halfway to your goal. On a platform like Razoo, your donors will receive an email that a new exciting update has happened on your fundraising page. Perhaps you have a new video that you can release, so send that out. And then also throughout the campaign, thank your donors, thank them online, thank them through Twitter, thank them, through snail mail, but continue to thank them and continue to let them know what the impact of their gift has been. We like to encourage nonprofits, after the campaign has finished and hopefully you're celebrating, to share that with your donors and to keep and continue the dialogue. The online fundraising campaign is really just the beginning of that dialogue. So another thing we wanted to just show you here was one of the tools with a platform like Razoo is that not only can you create a video for your campaign, explaining your campaign, you can actually customize a thank you video that will go to your donors to thank them for their impact, but it's also another wonderful opportunity for them to become aware of the campaign again and to send it and share it to their network and hopefully bring in more dollars. So we'll quickly show you this video.
Thank you for giving. Thank you. Thank you for giving.
Thank you.
Thank you for giving.
Thank you.
Thank you for giving.
What you'll notice in this one, whether we get to play it or if we just have to send it out as a link, is that it's also something that is not that complicated to put together. It doesn't take a big budget. You don't need a Hollywood production studio. It's something that with readily available free tools that come preloaded on a laptop, you can edit something like this together with a flip cam that costs $100, or even with a video from your phone. You can get HD quality video at this point. And so, unfortunately, the video does not seem like it wants to load.
Darian, actually, I think it did load for folks. I think it did come through. We're getting messages saying that they did see it, so I think it may just not have loaded on your screen. It loaded on mine, so hopefully folks saw it. But even if they didn't, we will include links to those so that you can see them as examples in the follow-up email later today.
That would be great. Oh, here we go. I think it's...
Thank you for giving.
Thank you.
Thank you for giving.
Thank you.
Thank you for giving.
Thank you.
Thank you for giving.
Sure, I think the video just finished, so let's move into Q&A. I know there's been a variety of different questions that have come through, I know Anne asked a question about can the default donation levels actually be changed in the middle of a campaign, and the answer is absolutely yes. Regardless of whether you're using Razoo or another platform, you can adjust, is it $5, $25, $100 and other, or is it $50, $250, $500 and other? And I would highly encourage you to do that as long as you're actually going to take the time to analyze the data and see which combination of default donation levels is going to help you optimize revenue generated per donor.
Great. We also had a question from Michelle asked, I would love to know how to set up a prompt for donors to donate. Like, is there a way to create one of those? Is that something that Razoo offers or other platforms?
I guess I'm not exactly sure what you mean by a prompt.
I saw that as well. I wasn't clear either. Go ahead, Becky. I wasn't clear on that either.
No, that's okay. I think what they mean is something that would actually pop up or open, like a little window that would prompt them to donate while they're doing some activity either on their site or within social media if they're on, their Facebook page or something. Is anybody aware of anything that would prompt somebody to donate?
I'm not sure whether I would consider it a prompt, but I think embedding a widget, we showed you a widget on the screen that was talking about how to promote your fundraiser, and that can sort of sit on your Facebook page and be embedded on your page, on your website. So it's not popping up, but it's a sort of large thermometer-looking thing that I think it's pretty difficult for people to miss. And it neatly shows, all the different donation levels that you can donate to. So perhaps a little bit more impactful than just a click here to donate button.
Great.
I know.
We have a question from.
The one thing
go ahead.
Yeah, I know the one thing that I've seen has been with YouTube. You can set up sort of a YouTube channel, and as a nonprofit, you can do that for free, where you can embed links and calls to action in your videos. So if you're creating one of these videos, you put it up on YouTube. At a certain point in the video, you could say, click here to donate, and then it'll take people to your website.
I love those. It always reminds me of pop-up video from the 80s. We had a question from Barb asking, so is crowdfunding replacing text to give? Do you think that they're not, can they coexist? Are they equally valuable and worthwhile for people to invest in?
Yeah, I actually think they're both valuable for sort of different purposes. Again, I think online fundraising and crowdfunding is really to raise money for a specific campaign. I think text to give is much more a powerful mechanism for an immediate ask. Obviously, it's been extremely successful, effective in the times of disaster, where you're asking people to sort of give in the moment. So I think they definitely can coexist and really have different purposes.
Great. And I will say that we do have, oh, sorry, go ahead, Darian. Sorry about that.
No worries. I was just going to underscore that and say, yeah, text to give is just one additional way to raise money. Crowdfunding is really an approach of sort of that United Way thermometer of, hey, we are launching a campaign to raise this much money for this purpose, and typically you're raising that money through the internet, but crowdfunding would be another avenue or medium for raising funds. Or excuse me, text to give would be another medium for raising funds.
Great, yeah, and a lot of times it is very much crowdfunded, even though it's the platform, like you said. And I will mention we do have a couple of products in the TechSoup donation catalog that offer text to give and mobile campaign donations, so Guide by Cell and Connect to Give if you are interested in those after the fact. We also have questions here from Lindsay saying that we're finding it challenging to tie to direct impact. We are a rare disease foundation. Seems easier to say that X money provides meals or clean water, but how do you help families who received an ultra-rare diagnosis? How do you show the impact of a donation in that really clear-cut way when you encourage people to donate?
So, I talk about this stuff all over the country, and I think a lot of groups, including some of the groups I've run when I was at Craigslist Foundation doing training and capacity building for nonprofit leaders, it's certainly not as simple as, for every $100 a kid is going to get a textbook or, some clean water. So a lot of nonprofits have have some thinking to do in order to come up with ways to sort of incrementalize their impact. But it is a very crucial exercise. And so I would really encourage you to, have a group meeting with your board, with your staff, close the door, hang out for a half an hour, and just start brainstorming about stuff. And so, for example, again, because it is ultimately all about impact, ultimately all about the people that you serve, in the case of an organization focused on making ultra-rare diagnoses, I would look at it as, how many diagnoses can you make, with an hour of a doctor's time? And so maybe it's, for $100, you will help us, administer another 5 diagnoses or 2 diagnoses that can help people like Bob, and then you tell the story about an individual. For $500, that will help us pay the salary of a doctor for a week and will allow him to serve, 10 children like Peter, or, and so it is ultimately all about mapping into impact into the constituents that you're serving, but really trying to think about, maybe it's just buying time, it's buying staff time, but what is an example of what you could do with that staff time?
That's a great tip. We have a question for Leslie. Does Razoo only work with U.S. nonprofits? Should be a quick one.
Yes, currently we do, yes.
Okay, great. We also have a question from Samir. We're often concerned about bothering our Facebook networks with asks. Is there an acceptable frequency to ask friends for donations? I know you talked about the optimal number of times to post per day, Darian, but is there can you ask people something once a week or more frequently, less frequently?
Yeah, I think asking 2 to 3 times a week, especially if you're doing a campaign, is fine. But it's, again, remember, Samir, the key issue here is not just how often can you ask. It's not about the frequency, it's about the ratio. Because if you're only sending out 3 Facebook posts a week and every single one of them is an ask for people to support your work, then that's bad. Right? So at least half of your posts should be about the issue and not about your organization and its needs. And then half of the posts that are about your organization should not be asked. They should be about your impact. They should be about, a research report you just released or a new hire you made or something else. So, the idea here is if you want to make 3 fundraising asks a week, then you should be planning on 12 posts a week, right? And it should be 3 fundraising asks. It should be 3 additional posts about your organization and its impact. And then it should be 6 posts about international relief or whatever the case may be.
That's great. Piggybacking on that, we had a person ask, saying that the posts about relief in general are not, the news stories don't get as many likes or shares as the posts that have pictures of their volunteers. Is that content still worth sharing? And it sounds like you think it really is, to help balance that sort of myopic, this is all about us, Facebook posting trend.
It's definitely valuable to put that content out there, but again, don't have that post end in a question mark. Ask your people, what do you think about what the Wall Street Journal said about international aid in Syria or whatever the case may be, and try and use it as an opportunity for thought leadership to connect it to your mission and to say, this is exactly the kind of work that we're here to advance, and really curious to hear your thoughts, right? So you want to invite people to be part of a conversation. That'll double the interaction rate right there. And then you also want to sort of create a little context of, why is this the article you chose to share?
Great. We are just about out of time, but I want to ask one other question because we had 3 or 4 people ask about how do you get the money? What's the best way to set it up? Do you have a recommendation of a tool to collect? Is it PayPal or some other tool that would collect donations? Do you ask for checks, set up an online store? Do you have any recommendations to leave people with on how to actually collect that?
Well, obviously I'd say Razoo. If you're working with an online fundraising platform, effectively that is all part of what the platform will do. So you'll provide a link to your online fundraising page. People will donate. We'll immediately send a tax-deductible receipt to the donor, and then the funds will be, dispersed. So, that's, we sort of, as part of the service, try and, take away that heavy lifting away from the nonprofit.
Great. And I know that there are, sorry, go ahead.
No problem. I was going to say, Razoo is definitely very much a leader in the field. There are other platforms out there, but I think the key thing here is you don't want to hack together multiple tools. You want a seamless experience for the donor. And again, back to that point I made before, but I just want to underscore because it's so important. If when someone makes a donation on your, 2 things I want to say. One is you should go to every page on your website and try and donate. And if it ever takes you more than 3 clicks to make a donation, You need to streamline your website, because I promise you, if you look at Google Analytics or any other tools, you're losing about 15% of people at every click. So get out of your own way, number one. Number two, when someone does make a donation, if you're not making it as easy as one click for them to spread the word via Facebook and Twitter, you're losing between 20 to 200% of additional online fundraising revenue. So whatever tool you use, it absolutely has to be integrated with social media. Even if you don't have a social media presence, you need your donors to be able to spread the word via social media. And that's absolutely crucial. And Razoo's a great
Terrific
example
point.
of a tool that does that for you.
Absolutely. Those are terrific points. And I know a lot of people have a CRM or a content management system they may already use, and a lot of those may incorporate with your website, might have social media integrated, and may have payment processing services available as part of that. So definitely check out what you already have too. With that, I just want to say thank you so much to our two presenters today. Fantastic information and a lot of good resources to think about. And I'd also like to take a moment to thank ReadyTalk, our webinar sponsor for today, that helps offer these webinars by donating their use of their platform to us. Thank you so much, everyone. Look for that email later on this afternoon with more resources and a link to this recording so you can share it with your network. Thanks so much, and have a terrific afternoon.
Thanks,
Great.
Becky.
Thank
you.